It's really amazing what one can learn today with the internet. I've found just some fascinating history of the family going back, 1,000 years or more. It seems that originally we were not Irish. We were Viking invaders from Norway. Who perhaps had stayed for a period of time on the west coast of Scotland before coming over to the Inishowen Peninsula of County Donegal. County Donegal is really where it's at in terms of the Harkins family. Mullen Head, which is up at the very tip top of the Inishowen Peninsula. Mullen Head is the very last point on the map for Ireland, and that's where our people were located for some time. I've read about how they were Aranas, which was revenue collectors. At that time, this was before the English came in and took over all the land. The monasteries owned most of the land in Ireland, and the people were just working the land, and it was our people who had the job of going out collecting money from the people, turning it over to the monks, and also doing the more secular side of dealing with the money. There's another story that has the family going back to Dalin, who was one of the early kings of Ireland. Turns out the name Harkins actually began as Arkin, which could mean golden head, which probably meant redheads. We have our share of those in the family. But beyond that, there is a place name in Norway which would connect the family with the Arkin name. The H sound came along much later in Irish history, and so it's an evolution that they picked up the H at the beginning to become Harkin, Hawkin, one of a number of different variations.
My husband Jerry and I were planning a trip to Ireland. My curiosity was piqued about my Irish ancestors, that our patriarch Peter and matriarch Anne McGivney Harkins came from County Longford, Ireland. So that's where I started my search. Through Roots Ireland, I found the 1828 marriage record of Peter and Anne McGivney Harkins, plus the baptismal records of all 10 children.
Our people had sort of strayed away from the initial County Donegal and ended up in Longford. There are two possibilities there. The Longford Historical Society says that at the time the Irish were coming down to the south into the Midlands to challenge Cromwell, that some of the Harkins men ended up meeting and marrying women in Longford, and that's how the family came to be there. I don't believe that's actually the way it developed. According to some research by cousin Judy with Roots Ireland, Patrick, the oldest of the family that we have definitely established, married Anne over in County Meath, and then they ended up in County Longford. So I think this may likely be more the way it played out. The most exciting moment of our trip to Ireland was when we discovered the grave of Peter Harkin's father, Patrick. Going into it, I had no hope of finding a tombstone, in that he died at a really rough point in Irish history. There had been cholera outbreaks in the 1830s. He died in 1837, then came the potato famine. But somehow there was this very impressive stone. We visited with the parish priest there, who sent us out to Granard Kill Cemetery, which is the location of the original town of Granard. It was later burned by some Viking invaders, and they had to relocate the town. All that's left now is the oldest cemetery and a very small piece of the original church that they call an oratory. And they do Mass out there twice a year on All Souls Day and Easter. But the priest sent us out there, and he said, you know, I think I may have seen some Harkins names on the guide to the cemetery. Go out and see what you can find. So we got out there, and we found two names that really piqued our curiosity. But the name was not Harkins, but Harkins Late. And Cousin Judy, on her trip earlier, had been there and was thrown off by this addition to the name. What could Harkins Late have to do with the family?
The cemetery directory showed many McGivneys, but the intriguing find was a Patrick Harkins Slate and a son, Michael Harkins Slate, from Castle Nugent, both dying in 1837 within months of each other. I knew there had to be a connection because Peter and Ann's oldest two girls, Rosanna and Margaret, were born in Castle Nugent. Further, the tithe allotment books of 1833 show a Pat and Peter Harkins and a Henry McGivney farming in Castle Nugent and surrounding areas. Cousin John Patrick unravels the mystery in his book.
So it turned out that I really believe God sent a local woman there that day. And my sister and I had gone back out to the huge hill with St. Patrick's statue on top. But Cousin Joan stayed there and struck up a conversation with this woman. And it turns out this woman is like an authority on this cemetery. She spends much of her time hanging out there, to the point that when Joan pointed out the plot number, she was able to go straight to this impressive tombstone. And not only that, the stone, which was like 180 years old, was so covered with lichen, and there had been so much wearing down of the lettering on the tombstone that we couldn't make out. But this woman who's hanging out there all the time could stand at an angle and read to us exactly what the inscription said. And it turned out that the inscription was Patrick Harkin, or Harkins Late, of Castle Nugent. And so it occurred to me that the guy who dug the stone left out a space there, that the widow actually wanted to say Patrick Harkins, Late of Castle Nugent. So I'm thinking this just has to be our guy. So we went from there to church records and the local Granard Library and found records of this guy, and 4 sons who were his. A son, a single son, then twins, and then a 4th son. Here is, again, is one of the mysteries of the family that I have not been able to solve. But Peter must have been one of those 4. They must have had double names, because the Peter doesn't show up as the baptismal name of any of the 4. But there is a Michael who's also commemorated on the tombstone. And these people must have been a little better off than most. of the peasants at that time. Land records that David Leahy turned me on to show that Patrick Harkins had 3 different pieces of land that they were working. And so perhaps they had the means, his widow had the means to erect this very nice, by those times standards, very nice tombstone. My great-grandmother, who married John William, actually was a Protestant from County Armagh. Cemeteries up in County Armagh likewise did tombstones using that style. Guide for the cemetery that has him listed as Harkins late, their names were Harkins. We don't know too much about quite a number of the Peter and Ann's children. Michael we know about, and he is buried in Sulphur Springs Cemetery. Beyond that, we know there was a sister named Rosanna who seems to have died young, unmarried, and is buried at Sulphur Springs but in an unmarked tomb. Then there was Patrick E., through whom most of us descend. Both Big Uncle Pat and John William, the folks we are intimately tied together with, came down through Patrick E. and Parthenia Harkins. Beyond that, there was a Thomas who has some descendants in the area. And then there was marrying Mary. Mary had 3 husbands during the course of her lifetime, and there are descendants around connected to all 3 of her husbands. The Crafts were a really fascinating family. John William and Eliza had only one daughter who lived to maturity, and that was Lucy. And she had gone off to Vicksburg to become a Mercy nun. She had boarded over there, as many of the women from St. Anne's would be sent to Vicksburg or Jackson or Meridian to the convents there to board for high school. She was going beyond high school to become a nun until John William decided that was not such a good idea. But the Crafts originally were from Sulphur Springs, and Joseph Craft, Lucy's husband, had been over in Georgia as a Jesuit seminarian, but decided that wasn't his calling and came back home to Mississippi. And so Joseph and Lucy married and began the large Craft family.
My grandparents were Lucy Ann Harkins and Joe Sebastian Craft. Her parents were John William and Eliza Honeyford Harkins. My dad was Paul. That was a hobby that my daddy thought it was worthwhile, and we would walk through cemeteries and find, where this one or that one, and what the connection was, and it was something he taught me.
I had a really good taste of the Irish blood that was out there from 2 perspectives. My father was from the Sulphur Springs, and his mother was a Donahoe, and so we called him Donnie Who. But I don't know which is correct, and it doesn't matter, I don't suppose. But I got a kind of a double taste of the Irish blood. That name appeared in Maryland, and they migrated out of Maryland and into Georgia. And there's a very, very large Luckett family in the Georgia area there that have pretty regular reunions and that type of thing. The Lucketts actually were led by a gentleman by the name of Sylvester, who came from Locust Grove, Georgia, He settled in Sulphur Springs, and from his, I think Sylvester had maybe 12 to 14 children. And they literally spread throughout the Canton and Madison community and to all areas of the state, for that matter, after that. And of course, my grandmother was also from that area because of her marriage to my my grandfather, and then of course my great-grandfather was there before him. And the Luckett's are a pretty big name in Madison County. My father was part of the Pat Luckett family that came down into Sylvester too. That cemetery out there is just full of tombstones, and I know you've been there a lot and you've seen what's up there. And there are not nearly as many Harkins there as there are Luckett's, but the Harkins, of course, moved on. I guess they were looking for more fertile ground. Peter and Ann that went into Sulphur Springs first, and then on to the Yakanucany River and homesteaded there. I'm looking for these two as a combination to pass on to my children. I think our family has really got a lot to look forward to as a result of what's going on right now.